Hey everyone, thanks for tuning into this quick Cinecolor tutorial. Today we're going to be looking at some S-Log3 footage that I have up on the screen here. This was shot recently for a Cinecolor short film, and we just went through the full color grading process, and I've been using a new tool to color grade in DaVinci Resolve that I want to share with you, and it's really helpful if you want more natural colors, especially if you're working with palettes that are a little bit more saturated and have reds and other vibrant colors as this shot does. So we're going to start off here just by adding this LUT here, which is just a standard Rec 709 conversion. So this is basically just the raw footage straight out of the camera in Rec 709. So you can see right off the bat, the reds are very saturated. One of the challenges with working with Sony footage in particular is that red colors and, as I said, other vibrant colors tend to get oversaturated very easily. If you compare that to even the yellow here, which is somewhat saturated, it's not quite as vibrant. And certainly if you look back at the greens in the background, which on the day were actually quite vivid looking to your eye, those are not nearly at the same saturation level as the red here. So let's make another node, and I'm going to show you one of the problems and the challenges with grading S-Log3 footage. We're going to go down here to the saturation control, and I'm just going to crank this way up just for dramatic effect. So let's go all the way up. And if I turn that on and off, just look at the red colors and look how much more saturated the reds are becoming than every other part of the frame. And not only are they becoming a lot more saturated, but they're also becoming a lot brighter, which is one of the big problems and the big challenges with Sony Color Science in particular. This, by the way, is true of many other camera brands, many other color profiles. Generally speaking, if you saturate a vivid color like red, it's not only going to have more color saturation, but it's also going to have higher luminance values. It's going to feel brighter, but that's often not what you want. Usually what you want is to saturate a shirt like this, but not have it also appear brighter, because in a sense, you're kind of relighting your scene by doing that. And unless that's what you're going for, that can be really problematic. So let's turn this off for a second. Now I'm going to show you a completely different method. This is a brand new tool in DaVinci Resolve. And there are other tools like this that you can find as third-party plugins for all sorts of different editing software, including Resolve. But essentially this new tool, which is called Color Slice, uses a completely different method than the standard saturation you're going to get, let's say, with the color wheels. Rather than using an additive saturation where we're literally just creating more saturation across the board, this Color Slice tool uses a subtractive method. And what that means, without going into all the technicalities, is essentially you're getting more saturation without also increasing the brightness of the most saturated areas. So just to give you an example here, and again, we're going to do something pretty extreme here, but I'm going to turn the saturation setting in the Color Slice tool all the way up. And you can see right off the bat, obviously this image is very much oversaturated, but let's take a still image of that. Now let's turn off the grade. Let's turn on the previous grade. So this is the one with saturation turned all the way up, but using the color wheel settings as opposed to the color slice settings. Now, if we contrast those two images, I'm going to put them right next to each other. You could see that. Let's just look at the red shirt in isolation. I'm going to keep it split here so you can see. The red on the color slice version feels a lot more natural. Even though it's very saturated, it has a lot more density to it, and the luminance values, the brightness overall, is much more representative of what that actually looked like on the day. And again, we'll go back to this one. This looks like a completely different color at this point. If we were to just look at the background, these greens actually look okay with this oversaturated look. Even the skin tones, they're not perfect, but they're sort of in the right ballpark. You could see the blue sky in the background, but those red tones have turned completely neon, and the shirt does not look anything like what it would actually resemble in reality, whereas the color slice version looks far more natural. And this digital pipeline is essentially more reminiscent of what you would get with actual motion picture film or with higher end digital cinema cameras and color pipelines. So if we were to actually build this into a look, and I'll reset this. So here's our basic S-Log again, just to kind of reset our eyes. We'll turn on the color slice effect. This would definitely be way too saturated for my personal taste, but I might take it back to about halfway there. And if you take a look at this, let's just turn this node on and off. That's a very natural amount of saturation across the board that is, in a sense, evening things out. It's not oversaturating one area and not bringing up saturation enough in another. It's very uniform across the board. And it's, again, using the subtractive method that is ensuring that those red tones and other vibrant colors do not go completely neon and get extremely overexposed as the saturation levels come up. There's a lot more to this color slice tool. Obviously, this is just the overall saturation setting, but there's also density settings, there's density depth, saturation balance, saturation depth, and hue. And you can actually adjust any of these colors individually as well. So this is an overall saturation, as I mentioned, but if we want to kind of disable that node for a second, I'm going to make an alternate version. And on this one, we're only going to use the red tool here. So we can take this slider on the left, which is the density slider. And first, let's turn it all the way down. So you see with no density, it feels very thin, and it actually starts looking kind of like that oversaturated look. Not quite as bad, but it gets a bit of that neon color to it. On the other hand, if we turn the density all the way up, it's going to bring down the overall luminance values and the brightness of the shirt. So this is a density slider that you can definitely dial in to taste in terms of getting the right saturation look. And then of course, this slider here is the actual saturation setting. And this gives you more control than just simply using the saturation slider in isolation at the top. So you can push and pull around these sliders and find the right mix and the right combination for you. Obviously, if you turn saturation all the way down, you're going to get this neutral, almost gray effect on the image. If you turn it all the way up, it's going to be very saturated, but it's going to keep the density levels right in that correct range that we're looking for. So we can keep that right there just for here. Obviously, this is very oversaturated, and it's also pulling colors in her lips and on her skin tones up here by the eyes, which we would either mask out or use a different tool here to isolate. But I'm just going to show you again for argument's sake what it would look like if we turn the density slider here all the way down and the saturation all the way up. So this is essentially what you get if you're just saturating the image using standard techniques. If you keep the density setting at about half here, then that's essentially going to just give you a consistent look, whether you are all the way desaturated at gray or you're fully saturated at red. And then of course, if you want to go a little bit darker, you can crank this up. If you want to go a little bit brighter, you can crank it back. So let's leave this setting roughly around here just for now, so we can take a look at this center slider, which helps isolate the colors even further. So if we go all the way to the left, you could see it's only affecting a smaller range within the red tone. So if I crank up the saturation all the way or all the way down, this is not going purely to gray anymore. This is going almost a little bit pink or kind of salmon color. If I go all the way up, it's very saturated, but not quite as saturated as it would have been otherwise. And as I move the center slider, you could see it affects a different part of the range. And if I go here all the way to the right, this is where it affects way too much of the image. I'm just showing you this again, just as an example, but you can see the red in her skin tone and her lips, on her nose, her eyes, all of that is coming out. So it's really up to you to kind of play around with these sliders and use them to isolate just the colors that you want to affect. And then also use the density and saturation sliders in combination to individually control the saturation levels, but also the brightness and darkness of the saturation within the color that you're isolating. And of course, there is the hue slider here as well. So if you want to make any minor or major adjustments to the color, you can slide this all over the place. Let's just, again, go kind of crazy with it here just for fun. That's giving us kind of like a teal color. Let's saturate it. And again, do this in a way that we normally would not do if this were a final image, but just to kind of demo this for you. And you can really quickly and easily start isolating those colors and tweaking them. In all reality, most likely, if you were actually coloring this shot and using the hue slider at all, you would probably just be shifting it a little bit to the left or a little bit to the right, just to kind of add either a little bit more warmth to it or to cool it down a little bit. And in this case, you're going a little bit more kind of fuchsia. In this case, it goes a little more kind of reddish orange, but you typically don't want to pull these too far, because also then when you play back the image later, if you pull apart the colors too much, you're not going to get a very clean look on the t-shirt. It's going to feel a little bit broken apart, and you're going to have some artifacting issues potentially in your final render. But all in all, this tool is extremely powerful. We've only really looked at just kind of the overall saturation effect as well as modifying the red channel here. But this is just such a powerful tool to dig into if you have DaVinci Resolve. If you don't have DaVinci Resolve, you can look into other color density tools and plugins for Final Cut Pro or Premiere or whatever software that you're using. But I highly recommend trying this out on your footage, especially if you are a DaVinci Resolve user, because this is built right into the latest version and it just gives you much, much more natural colors. Use this no matter what camera that you're shooting on. But as I said at the top of the video, this is particularly important for Sony cameras because S-Log3 color science is known to be one of the most problematic of all when it comes to these color density issues. So hopefully you guys will get a chance to test out this color slice setting for yourself. Otherwise, be sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're going to be posting a ton of additional workflow tips and tutorials on color grading for not only S-Log3, but tons of other color profiles and detailing all sorts of different creative looks that you can build in DaVinci or in other software for that matter too. So definitely subscribe to our channel and we will see you guys soon with another episode.